What is your team's behavior revealing about your leadership? That's right. Your team is actually giving you a review, and sometimes we don't even pick up on that. It's because they don't always give it to you in words. They often will send us signals on how well we're doing as leaders. My name is Tom Goodlett, and I love to work with leaders, helping them perform well, but not just them perform well, help their team members perform well also. Now, I want to share with you today 3 signals that your team members might be sending to you. And if you're picking up on these 3 signals, you might want to adjust how you lead. Now, let me first say, there's not too many leaders who intend to evoke a poor response from their team. No, at least not the ones that I know or that I work with. No, most of us leaders, we want to go ahead and promote great behavior. We want to promote great productivity among our team. But sometimes the way we go about in communicating will actually prevent what we're trying to promote. Now, it really goes back to not our intentions, but actually the experience that people have when they interact with us. In other words, you can tell your people that you are an open book, or you can tell people that you're always willing to listen, and they will put you to the test. And if they show up, they're going to, well, see how you respond, see how you react. And then if they don't like it, well, they're probably not going to tell you right away, but you might be able to pick up on it from 3 signals that, again, let's go ahead and go through. The first signal that we need to address is silence. In other words, if your team is super quiet, what I mean is maybe you throw something out for discussion, or maybe you're looking for some feedback and you're saying that, and they don't give you any. They're just quiet. And what's interesting is a lot of time when our team remains quiet, we assume, well, it's because they fully understand. It's because they're all on board. It's because they love my idea that I just put out there. But when there's no pushback and no feedback, often that is a negative signal about how your team feels about you, especially when it comes to trusting you and trusting how you'll respond to feedback, to challenges, to things that actually might, well, help you out. I remember working with a leader, and you learn pretty quickly. This leader would say in a meeting, they would say, okay, this is open for discussion. And everybody who was there knew that that was not true. But every once in a while, you'd have that new employee or that person who was newly invited to the meeting, and they would start discussing, and maybe they would have a contrary opinion. And what the rest of us knew, because we had put it to the test, is that leader didn't really mean it was open for discussion. They meant if you disagree with what they just said, they're going to argue and put you down to the point of where you don't want to participate anymore. It wasn't really open for discussion. They just wanted you to tell them that you love their idea and be quiet. And so when our people, by the way, eventually in that meeting, we just didn't speak up. We just didn't say anything because we knew our thoughts weren't welcome. And when your team is silent, they're thinking that same thing. I used to have this fear when I was leading teams that they would see, team members would see my blind spots, but they wouldn't tell me. Or team members would see something that was wrong with an idea or pursuit that we were going towards, but they wouldn't reveal it. I think that's one of the scariest things, that your team sees something that's important but doesn't reveal that information. And so if you're picking up that your team seems to be quiet, when you open up for discussion, they don't discuss. When you push for feedback, they don't give feedback. You might want to consider what that might be saying about how well they trust you and how well they trust your response. When they maybe in the past have given that feedback, or maybe in the past have challenged you on ideas. The second signal that we need to talk about is when people speak up too late. In other words, eventually they do kind of clue you in on what they see and what they notice, but at that point in time, it's a little late in the game. At that point in time, things have spiraled so much out of control that now there's a really big mess to clean up. And a lot of times this happens because, people don't trust your reaction initially and things get too big that they can't cover it up anymore. But another reason this can happen is because they sense from you that you don't want to hear about it, or you want things to just be hunky-dory. You just want things to be always working out, and you're really not inviting drama, especially early on. I remember that there's a great book called Death by Meetings by Patrick Lencioni. And in this book, he asked the question, how come people can sit through a 2 hour movie, but they can't sit through a 2 hour meeting? The answer, drama. Drama is good. Conflict is good, as long as it's dealt with in a healthy way. And so a lot of times people don't invite the drama, but the drama is what can make a meeting interesting, what can make an interaction interesting. And so a lot of times, we're not asking the right questions. We're not opening the conversation up for the right kind of discussion. Good questions could be, well, how would you handle this differently? Or what might break down with this plan? Or what do you see wrong that could happen? In other words, it's better to be preventive, but if you don't build that into your culture and you don't build that into your conversation, well, then people will speak up too late to really get a handle on the problem. When a lot of times people can see it, they can smell it coming before it arrives. And of course, we want to build that more and more into the culture that we are leading, being preventive on problems and speaking up early. But if by the time you hear about it, it's already spiraled out of control, well, that would be a signal about your own leadership, and that maybe they don't feel comfortable or don't think you want to hear the drama early on. And of course, we got to respond to that in a healthy way. But we also want to invite those opportunities. The third signal we want to look out for is when it sounds too good to be true. Yeah, sometimes people, they try to polish it up before they give us the details. And even then, they're probably withholding some details because nothing's perfect. But sometimes people, they've interacted with us in a way where they think that we need perfection, that there's no room for error, that it's got to be it's got to be good. It's got to be high quality, or it's got to have no flaws and no mistakes. And so when we communicate that, well, then those are the kind of messages our team will eventually give back to us. They will send us signals, and it's going to sound like it's too good to be true. And the reality is, it's because it is too good to be true. And so we'll miss the things that are not so clean. They're a bit messier, or they're a bit more complicated. And these are things, of course, we need to know about. We want to get those healthy metrics. Sometimes, too, people will do this because they don't want to disappoint us. All right, we've given them maybe some wiggle room, or we've given them some delegation, we've given them some responsibility, and they don't want to let us down. And so when we come around and we ask how things are, they just keep telling us it's fine, it's good, everything's great, but it doesn't mean it is. And so sometimes we have to dig for deeper metrics to kind of figure out what's really going on without stepping on the toes of those we've empowered. If it always sounds too good to be true, then it's probably because our team thinks we can't handle the truth. All right, we've taught them something we didn't really want to teach them. Again, not through our intentions, but perhaps through our reactions. And so we want to make sure we clarify with them and show them that we value progress over perfection. I remember how I would tell my team members a lot of times that I trust them, but then I'd have to go back and define what that trust meant. And so I define trust as this. I believe that 9 times out of 10, you'll make the right decision, and that 1 time out of 10, you don't. We'll just go back and we'll clean that up together. But we want our people to know that mistakes happen. Things get messy, especially if we're trying to do them right. And so we want to leave that room. But if you're getting that signal where anytime your team members tell you what's going on, it sounds too good to be true, you might want to adjust how you lead. So how should you respond if you're getting these signals from your team? If you're experiencing silence, or they speak up too late, or it sounds too good to be true? Well, let's start adjusting the way we respond, and let's make this adjustment continuous and consistent. And so instead of just reacting right away, number one, let's pause. Just pause. Take a breath. All right. Yes, we want to invite complicated conversation. We want to open it up for discussion, but we need to just kind of pause and let that discussion happen. All right. So sometimes just being quiet and leaving room for the team to kind of share and speak up and to do these things. It means we have to be quiet and give them the floor and give them the room and just simply pause. The second response that we want to do is ponder. At least that's how I'm going to say it. And that is to take a moment and think about what was just shared. And sometimes that is a group activity that we kind of want to ponder what's been shared. We want to ponder the feedback. We want to ponder the pushback. And what is that really saying? Or why are we talking about this now when perhaps we could have prevented this earlier? And not as a punishment, not as a looking down, but actually using this as a learning opportunity. Something that I say to my kids all the time, and I know they're sick of hearing it because it's the way they finish the phrase for me, but it's sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. It's only failure if you give up. It's only loss if you give in. And so if something didn't go right, if it's messy or it's not perfect, let's talk about that and use it as a learning experience. Let's kind of ponder what took place and kind of reflect. And also pondering also means that really thinking about what are people saying? What are they feeling? And to really figure out the details there and work through that. And again, work through it together. Once we have paused and once we have pondered, then the next thing we want to do is praise. We want to praise. We want to thank our people for being honest. We want to thank them for having the courage to give some feedback or the courage to kind of speak up and share what they're thinking and feeling or share what they observe or share the details that they have, even if it feels like pushback. Even when it's hard to hear, we need to be grateful that they're willing to share so we can hear it. There's been several times this has been put to the test in my own leadership. I remember somebody just kind of being blatant and kind of telling me, hey, I know you said a lot of things, but that last thing you said makes no sense. And that was kind of a blatant way to put it. I'll be honest, I kind of laughed for a second because it threw me off. And then I said, hey, thank you. Thank you for speaking up and telling me that. Again, my worst fear is that my team will see something, including blind spots, and they won't speak up. They'll see a bullet coming and they won't tell me, and I'm going to get hit by it, or somebody's going to have to pay a high cost for it. And so we have to praise, we have to be thankful, and we need to reward honest feedback. We need to reward participation. We need to reward our people speaking into things and let them know we appreciate it, or else they're just not going to do it. So let's recap. Let's review. If you're picking up on some negative signals, things like silence, things like your team speaking up too late, you're finding things out too late, and that it sounds too good to be true when you hear about it, well, now maybe we want to adjust. We want to adjust because perhaps our team's telling us they don't trust us, our reactions in the past haven't matched up to our intentions, and maybe they think we can't handle it or we won't appreciate it. And instead, when they share these type of things, especially if we have a forum where they can, we want to pause, we want to ponder, we want to praise them for what they've shared and having the courage to do that. And if we can do that consistently, well, we should take that as a compliment if they continue to share, if they continue to speak up when they see something coming before it lands. And if they give us kind of the messy details, well, that would be a great review of our leadership. That means our team feels comfortable with enough with us to tell us the truth and to help us all succeed.